Best-in-class supply chains. That's the topic this week. What exactly is a best-in-class supply chain and why is it important? Coming right up. So let's talk about best-in-class supply chains. It's one of those terms that gets used a lot, doesn't it? And a lot of people don't really sort of understand the definitions of it. So I'm going to share a couple of slides and we'll go through exactly what people mean when they're talking about best-in-class supply chain. And I'll show you some numbers about why it's really important for your supply chain to be up there and considered best-in-class. So let's just have a look at this triangle first. And if you're looking at supply chains, I tend to look at them in 4 slices, if you like. And hopefully you're not down at the bottom here. So at the bottom, I've called this grouping sort of blissfully unaware. These are the supply chains where they think they're going okay and they're sort of stumbling along, but they're really not aware at all of whether their performance, service performance and cost performance is good or not. They have no idea about how they stand within their industry, which is a bit sad because there could be a lot of potential there and they just don't even realize it. The next level up then I've called good enough, and that I always consider quite a dangerous place to be, and that's why I put that big red line above it. Good enough means that you think you're going okay. You know enough to know that your supply chain's not that bad, but you're reasonably comfortable with it and you're reasonably okay with the performance. Why do you think that's a dangerous spot to be? Have a think about that for a second. I reckon it's a dangerous spot to be because it's kind of this glass ceiling, isn't it? You know, there's no pressure, there's no burning platform, there's no sort of burning incentive to make you get your supply chain performing better because it's good enough. And you kind of just coast along. So I think it's a bad place to be because you're kind of holding back the performance of the supply chain. Then we come across this term best in class. And I've put a 20% next to that for a very good reason. Best in class supply chains, the internationally recognized definition of that, is the 20% of top performing supply chains in each industry in terms of service and cost. So if you want to be best in class, you're going to be in the top 20%. And then above that, I've got top 2%. This is not something that's generally measured by sort of international standards, but it's something that we have been measuring for over 20 years in our benchmarking service. And I'll explain what that top 2% is all about in a moment. That, I reckon, is the place to aim for, not best in class. And then I've got some very rough numbers here in terms of supply chain cost as a percentage of sales. Now, before you say, you know, those numbers don't look right, or, you know, we're worse than that or better than that. These are very generic numbers that I've taken from some of our benchmarking work. It's kind of an average across all industries. It's an average across all different types of businesses. So it's a fairly meaningless number in that regard. Don't be too concerned when you're looking at this percentage, but I just wanted to kind of give you a ballpark and what the differences are between the different levels. So those blissfully unaware group are generally operating at just around sort of 10% supply chain cost as a percentage of sales. So, you know, if that's you, maybe it's worth having a look at your supply chain and certainly benchmarking it, remembering this is kind of an aggregate of all types of businesses. The good enough are sort of the 5.7 up to about 10%. The best in class are usually under 5.7%. In FMCG industry and those sorts of industries, I can tell you best in class is a lot lower than that. And then obviously the top 2% are doing even better. So there's just some rough numbers. Now let's dig into this a little bit more detail. Why is it important to understand what best in class is for your industry and what the performance of your supply chain is? Well, if you look at the lower sort of portion of this, the lower 50%, this by the recognized standard is basically, people refer to it as, you know, below average. It's actually the lower performing 50% are you know, on that left-hand side of that bell curve. You've then got the next 30% or so, which are better, but still not best in class. And then you've got the 20%, which is the top performers, the best in class performers. And then I'll talk about the 2% in a second. So if you're looking at that, the size of the prize can be enormous. You know, if you're that sort of below par, you're in that 50% level. And the terminology that we use is sort of, I'm trying to remember what the term now is, it's parity. But just think of it as 3 blocks. Okay, so we've got the best in class, we've kind of got that 30% in the middle, and then everybody else is in that 50%. The plan for you in your supply chain is to start spanning that gap, start to identify the size of the prize in that gap and moving yourself towards the 20%. So it's a massive catch up, you know, if you're in that lower portion. I just remembered what these different sections are called. So the green section in this sort of terminology is termed advantage. The grey section here, the 30%, is termed as parity. And the red section, the bottom 50%, are classed as disadvantage. It's just the way it's done in this particular sort of benchmarking within the supply chain, and that's the recognised way of doing it. So the green, best in class, then you've got parity, which is not quite the same as average. Let's talk about the 2% for a minute. And there's some pretty astounding numbers here. So we've been benchmarking supply chains for about 25 years across all industries, you know, all sectors, all countries. And one of the things that we noticed about 12 years ago, I think it was, we started to look at the real best performers in each sector. And what we found was that the supply chain, so we're going to break down the best in class now, we're getting towards this 2%. We found that the supply chains who are providing best in class service, the absolute best service in their sector, were generally operating at almost half the cost of their competitors, their peers. And you know, it's a staggering number, isn't it? Because we all learn when we're studying supply chain or logistics at university that as service goes up, so cost goes up. And I can remember being taught, you know, at Cranfield University that there was a point where the service level maybe gets to 98.5%, and the costs go up exponentially. We found the complete opposite by benchmarking supply chains for over 20 years. And here are some of the numbers. So what we're looking at here is a number of different industries. I've selected 6. We've got pharmaceutical, we've got manufacturers, we've got suppliers to retail, we've got supply type businesses, distributors and industrial suppliers. And we've got the average number there in that sort of yellowish bar. And then in the red bar is the best in class performance. So this is their supply chain cost as a percentage of sales. So let's have a look at that retail supplier one, which is right in the middle there. The best in class are operating at under 5% as a percentage of sales, whereas, you know, the average, if you like, are operating at 11%. That's that 50% sort of below the midpoint. It's the same in every single industry. The first time we looked at this, we were absolutely staggered. We thought, I think we were doing it for a pharmaceutical company, and we thought, well, maybe it's the pharmaceutical sector that's got this peculiarity. And we broke it down then across all sectors, and I'm showing you 6 here. And it was exactly the same pattern, that the best in class in terms of service were providing that service at about half the cost of their competitors. So now we start to hone in around that question of why is it so important to A, be best in class, and B, understand what it actually means. What's the benefit? And also a key question I want you to think about is, how can it possibly be that these companies providing much better service, the best service in their industry sector, do so at half the cost? Have a think about that for a second. How can they possibly do it? Because as service increases, we're taught that cost increases. Well, what we found year after year, every time we look at these numbers, is that is just not true. You reach a sort of tipping point where as service increases, costs start to flatten off and then actually start to reduce. Why do you think that could be? I'll share 3 reasons with you. The first one is that these companies providing outstanding service get it right the first time, every time. And so they don't make any mistakes. There's less rework, there's less returns, there's less expediting, there's no firefighting. They're not having to deal with returns at all because everything is accurate, the customers are happy. They probably don't even have a customer service department anymore, or a customer complaints department anymore, because they're absolutely passionate about getting every single order 100% right, delivered on time. So that's the key. The next one is that they really do focus on the detail. And I was reading something the other day, there's a term you might have come across, which is, it's all about the 1%ers. And I think it was actually about the British road cycling team or something. And it was how one of their coaches came on board a few years back and decided that they were going to kind of apply this 1% model where they would try to improve every element of performance by 1%. Whatever that is in cycling, we'll be away from the start quicker by 1%. We'll, maintain our speed across the finish line better by 1%, whatever it is, the terms in cycling. And that's exactly what these companies do in their supply chain. They look at every single little step in the process and they try to just tweak it and tweak it and tweak it and get every little step perfect. And it all accumulates and has a massive impact. So the costs really become apparent when they start to look at this level of detail. And when you have that passion for service, you find the culture in these sort of businesses, they don't let mistakes happen. They can't walk past mistakes. And so because they don't let mistakes happen, they have this outstanding service, which customers absolutely love. Now this is the crunch. Number 3, it's the price-service relationship. So not only are these companies providing fantastic service, back at the top there's less rework, less returns. That's going to reduce cost anyway. The beautiful part of this, number 3, is because the service is so good that customers actually become to rely on that these companies become the preferred supplier. Customers start to buy more from them, recommend them to other companies, and so their sales grow. That's the sort of compounding magic of this whole thing. So by being more efficient, your costs are going down. Focusing on the detail, you're kind of getting rid of all the mistakes and the errors. But because it's so good, customers are actually buying more. And very often these companies can actually raise their prices. So that is how those companies providing the best service in their industry do so at almost half the cost of their competitors. So there we go, best in class. Remember what that is? It's the companies that are providing, in terms of service and cost, they're the top 20% in each industry in terms of their supply chain. And remember the benefit of being best in class. You're providing much better service, your customers are going to be happier, and your costs will start to reduce. And you might even get your supply chain into the top of that triangle, that top 2%, where you're providing the best service in your industry and your costs are almost half of the competition. So there we go. It's a topic that I've mentioned a couple of times on the channel before, but I thought I'd just bring it all to kind of together a little bit this week. Love to hear your thoughts on that down below in the comments. Does your supply chain operate actually at best-in-class levels? And what have you found? Have you benchmarked your supply chain? How do you know how well you're performing against your competitors? And what I'll do also, I'll try and remember, I'll put some links in the description down below the video, and if I remember into the comments as well. I'll put some links there to some more stuff that you can read about this topic. I've got lots of blog posts and things like that about best-in-class service and how to get there. So there we go. Thanks for watching this week. Oh, if you're not already subscribed to the channel, do hit that subscribe button. That way you're supporting the channel by telling us that we're going okay and that you like particular topics. So we always look at all the videos and see which ones got more subscribers and more comments and things like that, because that helps us understand what topics that you enjoy most. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week. Bye for now.